The conference room was completely silent except for Miles's confident voice echoing through the space. He stood at the front of the room, pointing at screens filled with charts, graphs, and data that I had created over many months of hard work and dedication. "This predictive model will revolutionize everything we do," he announced to the 3 investors sitting across from the long table. His smile was wide and confident, like he owned the world and everything in it. He gestured to the slides like he built them with his own hands, like he stayed up all night coding and testing and perfecting every detail. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched him explain my work like it belonged to him, like I had never existed. I was sitting in the back of the conference room, wearing a gray sweater, trying my best to disappear into my chair and fade away. Nobody was looking at me. They were all watching him perform like he was the star of the show, the genius behind everything. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone might hear it through the quiet room. Miles kept talking, using words that I had written in my own voice, showing results from months and months of my work that came from my brain. Then one of the investors leaned forward and asked a question that made Miles pause mid-sentence, his confidence wavering slightly. "Who actually designed this predictive model?" the investor asked. Miles opened his mouth to answer, but the investor wasn't done. He was flipping through the project binder, page by page, and his finger stopped on something important. He looked up. He looked directly at me, and I felt my entire body freeze. "There's a name here," the investor said, pointing at the signature page. "Helen Brooks." "Who's Helen?" My name hung in the air like a bell that had just been rung. It felt like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for an answer. Miles's face changed dramatically in an instant. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug somewhere deep inside him. He started to say something to explain it away, but the investor was already standing up, already walking toward me. His expensive shoes clicked on the floor with each step. "Is Helen Brooks here?" he asked the room. I raised my hand slowly, feeling my legs go weak. I stood up, feeling every single eye in the room turn toward me. Miles's smile had disappeared completely. It was like watching a mask slip off his face. "Helen designed the model?" another investor asked, confusion written all over his features. "I built it," I said quietly. The words came out smaller than I wanted them to. My voice sounded fragile, thin, but honest. "From scratch." The 3 investors exchanged long looks with each other. One of them whispered something to the other. They were definitely interested in me now. Not Miles. One of the investors, a tall man with distinguished gray at his temples, stood up and walked over to me. "Helen, is it?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Can we talk for a minute? Walk with me." My heart was racing as we stepped out of the conference room into the hallway. The other investors stayed behind. The hallway was quiet and empty. "How much of this project did you actually build?" he asked seriously. "All of it," I said. The words felt powerful saying them out loud, like I was finally claiming something that had always been mine. The research, the coding, the testing, every single algorithm, the entire model. Everything. He studied my face for a long moment, reading me like a book. I could see his mind working, calculating something important. "Miles didn't contribute anything?" he asked. I shook my head, meeting his eyes directly. "He told me to loop him in on updates. That's literally all he did. He read emails. He watched me work. He asked questions sometimes but nothing meaningful." The investor nodded slowly. "I thought something was off," he said. The presentation didn't match the energy behind the work. Something felt wrong. He was still talking when I saw Miles through the conference room window. He was moving fast, his face red with anger or panic. He was heading toward the door to join us. Miles appeared next to us. His smile forced like a rubber mask stretched across his face. "Gentlemen," he said, looking at the investor but avoiding my eyes completely. "I think there might be some confusion here. Helen is brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but she was working under my direction and guidance. I guided every single step of this project. His voice sounded fake, too smooth, like honey covering something rotten underneath. The investor didn't say anything. He just watched Miles with cold eyes, studying him carefully. The architecture, the approach, the entire strategy, that all came from me, Miles continued, talking faster now, his hands gesturing wildly. Helen executed my vision and my design. It's really a collaborative team effort. His desperation was showing through cracks in his story. I wanted to scream. Every word was a complete lie. The investor stepped slightly in front of me, a subtle move that felt like protection. That's interesting, he said slowly, his voice measured. Because according to the project files we reviewed, Helen submitted detailed documentation and code reviews months before you ever mentioned this project to management. Miles's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered with something that looked like fear. Well, he started, but the investor raised his hand. Can you present this again? The investor asked me directly, ignoring Miles completely. In more detail. Just you and us. I felt Miles's eyes burning into me. His fists were clenched at his sides. But I nodded. As we walked back to the conference room, memories flooded back to the very beginning of my journey. I had joined the company 2 years ago, fresh out of college with big dreams, hungry for success, nervous about everything, and trying desperately to prove myself and my abilities to everyone around me. Miles had noticed me immediately with his sharp eyes and keen instinct for talent. He was the director then, already building his reputation as someone smart, connected, and very important in the company structure. On my second day of work, he called me into his office and closed the door. I see potential in you, he had said, leaning back in his chair and studying me carefully. Rare potential. But you need guidance and mentorship. You need to learn how things work here in this company. I believed him completely with all my heart and soul. I was just a kid, really. 23 years old and desperate to succeed in this new world I had just entered. He offered to be my mentor and guide me through my career. He said he would help me grow and develop and become someone important in the company. I was grateful and appreciative. I was so grateful that I couldn't sleep at night thinking about how lucky I was. I remember thinking I was lucky to have him watching over me and guiding me through everything. He seemed so confident, so sure of himself and his abilities. I would learn later that his confidence was built entirely on taking credit for other people's hard work. But back then I didn't know that at all. I just thought he was good at his job. About 6 months into working at the company, I got assigned a small task. The managers wanted a basic data prototype for tracking customer behavior patterns. Seemed simple enough. Just something to test if the theory would work. I stayed late one night and built the first version. It worked better than anyone expected. So they asked me to expand it. Then expand it again. Months passed and the small prototype grew into something massive, something beautiful. I created a full-scale predictive model that could forecast customer trends before they happened. It was absolutely incredible. Every line of code was perfect. Every algorithm was optimized. I was proud of it in a way I had never been proud of anything before. This was my life's work. This was what I was meant to do. When I showed the early versions to Miles, he said, "This is fantastic. But you need to loop me in more. Show me everything. I want to make sure you're on the right track." His words sounded helpful, like mentorship. So I did. I trusted him completely. I sent him updates, showed him the code, explained my thinking. Then one day he asked me to email him all the project files for backup purposes. Just for backup. Almost said no. Something in my gut screamed at me to say no. But I didn't want to seem difficult or paranoid. So I sent him everything. The next day something strange happened. One of the internal documents I had created, a draft proposal I had written myself, suddenly didn't have my name on it anymore. My signature was gone. Just gone. When I asked Miles about it, he said it must have been a technical glitch. "These things happen," he said with a shrug. "Don't worry about it." But I was worried. My instincts screamed that something was very wrong. I started paying closer attention to everything. I noticed that when executives came by, Miles would explain my work to them using words like "I designed" and "I developed." He never said my name. He never gave me credit. At meetings, a VP complimented the project's architecture. Miles immediately cut in and said, "I've been guiding Helen every step of the way. This is really a collaboration between us." I felt my gut twist into knots. A collaboration. I had done 99% of the work. One afternoon, I overheard Miles on the phone in his office. The door was cracked open just slightly. He was talking to someone in HR. "I'm going to need to restructure the team," he was saying quietly. "Helen is talented, but she needs to be managed differently. Maybe move her to a different project. I need to take the lead on this one going forward." My blood ran cold. Move me. But this was my project. I had built it from nothing. The thought of him taking over and claiming all the credit made me feel sick. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what he said. He was planning to push me out. He was planning to take my work and make it his own. And there was nothing stopping him. I was just a junior employee with no power. He was a director with influence. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to let this happen without fighting back. I copied all my files and put them on an external drive. I created detailed timestamps on everything. I documented every email, every update, every moment I had worked on this project. That weekend, I sat down at my kitchen table with coffee and made a critical decision. I sent an email to HR and legal. The email was calm and factual. No emotion. No anger. I attached every document, every timestamp, every proof that I had built this project from scratch. I documented every instance of Miles taking credit for my work. I kept copies of conversations where he claimed the work as his own. I didn't make accusations or emotional appeals. I just presented evidence. Clear, undeniable evidence. Then I hit send. My hands were shaking. I had no idea what would happen next. But I knew I had to protect myself. On Friday afternoon, Miles called me into his office. "I need your files," he said casually. "For backup purposes. Security protocols, you know." My heart was already racing, but I kept my face calm and professional. "Sure," I said. "I'll email them to you." But I didn't email him the originals. I emailed him working copies. I already had the real files safe on my external drive at home. Monday morning came with dread and anxiety in my stomach, heavy and suffocating. I walked into the office and tried to act normal like nothing was happening and my world wasn't falling apart. But something was different immediately, the moment I sat at my desk. When I tried to access the project files on my computer, my access was blocked completely without warning. A little red message appeared on my screen saying I didn't have permission to view these files. My stomach dropped into my shoes like an anchor going down into the ocean. I went straight to Miles's office without waiting for an invitation or permission from anyone. "My access got restricted," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and professional even though I was shaking inside. He looked up from his computer and didn't meet my eyes, couldn't even look at me directly. "Oh yeah," he said casually, like it was nothing important. "Technical glitch. Should be cleared up soon." But his voice told me it wasn't a glitch at all and I knew it. He had done it on purpose with deliberate intention. He was locking me out deliberately and systematically. "In the meantime," he continued, "I need you to focus on some admin tasks. Date spreadsheets and files. I'm going to prepare the main deck for the investor meeting." My hands clenched into fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. He was locking me out completely. He was preparing to present my work without me there. He was erasing me from the process entirely and completely. I smiled politely like everything was fine and wonderful. Inside, I was shaking with rage and fury. That afternoon, I watched him carry a stack of papers into the main conference room. My slides, my work, my project and my life's effort. The next day I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront him. I walked into his office and closed the door behind me. I kept my voice calm, but my words were direct and serious. "You're taking credit for my work," I said. And you're locking me out so I can't prove I built it. Miles leaned back in his chair. He didn't look worried. He looked amused. He actually smiled at me like I was a child complaining about something silly. This made me even angrier. Learn your place, Helen, he said slowly, deliberately. Each word was like a punch. You're replaceable. There are 100 people who would kill for your job. Hundreds. Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt them settle into my ribs and stay there, heavy and painful. I felt my eyes burning with tears. I didn't say anything else. What was there to say? I just walked out of his office without looking back. That night I sat at home and stared at my laptop for hours. I was tired and angry and scared. But I was also thinking clearly. I had done the right thing by contacting HR and legal. Now I just had to wait and see what happened. 2 days before the investor meeting, HR sent me an email. They had received my documentation. They had reviewed everything carefully. And they believed me completely. But they said something important in their message. Please do not mention this to anyone yet, they wrote. We are investigating internally. Do not communicate with Miles about this. Just attend the investor meeting as planned. I felt a small spark of hope ignite in my chest. They were taking me seriously. They were actually investigating him. But I had to act normal around Miles for 2 more days. 2 more days of pretending everything was fine. Those 2 days felt like the longest days of my life. I sat at my desk and watched him work. I watched him practice his presentation. He had no idea that everything was about to change. He thought he had won. He thought I was just a junior employee who would fade away quietly. The morning of the investor meeting, I walked into the office feeling strangely calm and at peace. I knew what was about to happen. I had time-stamped documents. I had evidence. I had sent detailed records to HR and legal. I was prepared. Miles had no idea. He walked past my desk carrying the project binder, the one with my slides and my work inside. He looked confident and untouchable. He gave me a small nod like we were friends and colleagues working together. I almost laughed out loud. This man had spent months taking credit for my work. He had tried to push me out completely. He had told me I was replaceable. And now he was about to walk into a room with investors who wanted to know exactly who built this system. I picked up my notebook and headed to the conference room. My hands were steady. My mind was clear and focused. I was sitting in the back of the conference room. Miles was presenting my work and my ideas. The investors were listening politely. Then the tall investor with gray hair asked the question. Who built the predictive model? Miles hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it. That hesitation told me everything. He knew he was caught. He just didn't know how to handle it. Well, Miles started, trying to form words. But the investor was already reaching for the project binder. He found my signature quickly. He found my name written clearly on every page. Helen Brooks, the investor read out loud. Is Helen here? I raised my hand slowly. The investors leaned forward. They were suddenly very interested in me. Miles's face turned pale as all the color drained out of it. The tall investor pointed at me directly. Bring her forward, he commanded. My legs felt weak as I stood up. I walked to the front of the room. All eyes were on me now. Miles was frozen in his seat. I started presenting my work with quiet confidence. I explained the research that went into building the model. Hours and hours of research. I talked about the coding process and the challenges I had faced and overcame. I spoke about the testing phases and the bugs I had fixed. I spoke with confidence because I knew every single detail by heart. I had lived this project. I had built it with my own hands and my own brain. The investors listened with complete attention. They asked tough questions about technical details. I answered them perfectly. I explained complex concepts clearly. They nodded like they respected my knowledge and expertise. Miles tried to interrupt a few times. He tried to add comments or corrections. But the investors shut him down firmly. Let Helen finish, one of them said strongly. I kept presenting, and I could feel Miles getting angrier and angrier with every minute that passed. By the time I finished, the investors were leaning forward in their chairs. One of them whispered to his associate, "She's the one we want." Miles was starting to panic visibly. I could see it in his body language. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. Sweat was beading on his forehead. He tried to make a joke to lighten the mood, but it fell flat. Nobody laughed. His voice sounded nervous and high-pitched. The investors were not paying attention to him anymore. They had moved on completely. They were focused entirely on me and my work. After a few more minutes, one of the investors stood up and made a decision. "We'd like to have a private conversation with Helen," he said formally. "If that's possible." Miles's face went completely white, drained of all color. It was like watching someone's world collapse in real time. HR stepped into the room at exactly that moment. It was like they had been waiting for this signal. "Of course," HR said smoothly. "Helen, can you come with me?" I stood up and followed them out of the conference room into the hallway. As I walked past Miles, I didn't look at him. But I could feel his eyes on me, filled with desperation and rage. HR brought me into a private office with soft lighting and comfortable seating. The three investors were already inside, sitting around a small table. One of them was carrying a thick folder filled with papers. It was the folder I knew well. "Helen," the tall investor said, his voice serious, "we received some documentation from HR." He opened the folder carefully. It was the email I had sent to HR and legal weeks ago. It contained all the evidence I had gathered, all the timestamps, all the proof, every document I had collected. "This is very serious," the investor continued, reading through the materials. "We want to hear your version of events. Your actual version, not anyone else's." I took a deep breath and told them everything. I explained how I had built the project from scratch, from the very beginning. I explained how Miles had asked to be looped in on updates. I explained how he had slowly started taking credit for my work. I told them about the conversation where he said I was replaceable. The investors listened carefully to every word. An hour later, I was sitting in a large boardroom facing the entire company board of directors. 10 people sat around a long table. Miles was not in the room. HR had told him to wait outside. I repeated everything I had told the investors. Kept my voice calm and steady. I didn't get angry or emotional. I just presented the facts clearly and directly. One board member asked about the timestamps on my documents. I explained in detail how I had preserved evidence starting months ago. I had been planning for this. Another board member asked why I hadn't come forward earlier. I explained that I had documented everything carefully and sent it to HR and legal, and I had waited for them to investigate properly. The board members took extensive notes. They asked detailed questions about the project timeline. They asked me to walk through the entire development process. I could answer every question perfectly because I had lived this project. It was my life's work. When I was finished with my presentation, the board members brought in Miles. He looked absolutely terrified. His hands were shaking. One board member asked him directly, "Did you access Helen's files after hours?" Miles didn't answer at first. His mouth opened and closed like a fish struggling for air. "I need to see the IT logs," he finally said desperately. A board member nodded to someone, and an IT representative appeared immediately with a laptop. The logs were displayed on a large screen. They showed exactly what Miles had done. He had accessed my files at night. He had copied the code. He had removed my name from documents. He had done all of it after he thought everyone had left for the day. "This is a witch hunt," Miles said quietly, his voice shaking. One of the investors stood up slowly. "Is this the leadership you trust with millions of dollars?" he asked the board seriously. The room went completely silent. After Miles was escorted out by security, the investors asked to speak to me alone again. "Helen," the tall investor said, his voice warm now, "we came here to invest in a project, but what we found is something much better. We found the person who actually built it." He paused. We want you to lead this project independently. We want to transfer the contract under your name. You would be the project director. Full authority. Full ownership. I felt my heart stop. This was everything I had been working toward. Not just recognition but actual power and control. What about Miles? I asked quietly. He won't be involved anymore, the investor said firmly. Took a breath. I want to do this, I said. The investors smiled. I left the boardroom feeling like I was floating on air. Everything had happened so fast. One moment I was sitting in the back of the conference room, invisible. The next moment I was a project director with investors backing me. I was walking down the hallway when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Miles. He looked destroyed. His eyes were red. His voice shook as he grabbed my arm gently. Helen, please, he said. We're a team. We can work through this. We can fix this together. I looked at him. I didn't feel angry anymore. His words meant nothing to me. No, we're not, I said quietly. A team doesn't steal from each other. I pulled my arm away and kept walking. He called after me but I didn't turn around. Just then a board member appeared. Miles, he said firmly. My office. Now. Miles's face went gray. By the end of the day, the board had made their final decision. Miles was terminated for misconduct, theft of intellectual property, fraud. He was escorted out by security immediately. He wasn't allowed to come back. He wasn't allowed at future investor meetings. I watched from a distance as security walked him out. He didn't look at me. He didn't say anything to anyone. He just stared straight ahead like his life had just ended. 'Cause it had. His career in this industry was finished. His reputation was destroyed. Everyone in the office would know what he had tried to do. No other company would trust him after this. He glared at me one last time as the elevator doors closed. But I didn't feel bad for him. He had made his choices. A week passed and the news spread through the industry like wildfire. People were talking about it everywhere. The story of the director who tried to steal credit was too good not to share. I started getting messages from other companies. People wanted to meet me. My LinkedIn profile got hundreds of connection requests. People I had never met wanted to be part of my journey. One morning I saw that Miles had updated his profile. It now said, open to work. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The investors made an announcement. They had withdrawn from any future partnerships with Miles. Nobody wanted to work with someone who would steal credit like that. His career had essentially ended in one day. A month later, I was promoted to project director officially. The board made it official in front of the entire company. I was leading the team I had built from scratch. The investors praised my leadership in every meeting. HR asked me to help rewrite the company's ethics guidelines. They wanted my perspective. Got a new office. Miles's old office. It was on the executive floor with a view of the entire city. I stood at the window on my first day as director and looked out at the world. Everything had changed. I was no longer invisible. I was the person who built something amazing. 6 months later I sat at my desk, Miles's old desk, in his old office and breathed deeply with a sense of peace and accomplishment. The city stretched out before me like a painting of possibilities and new beginnings. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and pink and golden hues that reminded me of new starts. Miles was completely gone from my life and from the company where he once ruled with an iron fist. The project was thriving under my leadership and growing stronger every single day with my vision guiding it. The investors had doubled their investment because they believed in me and my abilities completely. We had expanded the team significantly with brilliant minds. I had hired people who deserved recognition for their talents and hard work. I had created a culture where everyone's work was seen, appreciated, and credited properly. Because I knew what it felt like to be invisible and overlooked by everyone around me. I knew that pain deeply in my bones. I swore I would never create that kind of toxic environment for anyone. I rebuilt my confidence brick by brick, layer by layer, piece by piece. I built my career on honesty, integrity, and hard work. I made sure that the people who did the work got the credit and recognition they deserved. One thing I learned through all of this difficult journey is simple but powerful and undeniable. You don't need to destroy people who try to bury you and erase you. Just let the truth breathe and exist freely. The truth will bury them on its own without any help. Truth is patient and powerful. It always finds light eventually.